So we talked about how vision is important for movement. So would proprioception be very important for movement? Well, of course it would, right? If proprioception is giving us our starting place, then we don't have that. If we don't have the starting place, how can we move? It would be very difficult, right? So think about, you're right here, right now, but what if you didn't know where you were? What if I dropped you off in the middle of the woods and said, go on back to school now? And how would you get there? You have no idea where you are. You have no sense of direction. So you would just start walking and hope you got somewhere until you figured out where you are, right? You would have no path. You would have no plan until you figured out where you are. And so it works the same way with movement. Without the sense of proprioception, it becomes very difficult to plan and organize movement. So it's not that it can't be done. Thankfully, our sense of vision is able to compensate for that much of the time, but it's still slow, it's clumsy, and thankfully there's a lot fewer people that struggle with the sense of proprioception than struggle with a loss of vision. So it doesn't happen very often, but it's very, very difficult to produce movement when it's gone. Okay, proprioception does decline with age. That is common. That is known. It happens to everybody. So those receptors I was talking about earlier, when you get older, you have fewer of them and they don't work as well. And so you still have the sense of proprioception, it's just not as accurate. So think about how this would affect movement. And of course, it would affect just about everything, but in particular, it may be one of the main causes of a loss of balance when you get older. Okay, and lastly, the last one we're going to talk about is the sense of touch. And so we talked about how vision is important for knowing where we are in the environment and what's coming at us. So if you thought about catching a ball, right, we want to be able to see the ball as it's coming at us, to plan when to catch it so it doesn't hit us in the face. Proprioception is telling us our starting point so that we can plan the path of the movement. And then as we grasp the ball, our sense of touch, especially pressure, becomes important so that we know exactly how much force we need to apply to the ball as we touch it so that we grasp the ball and it doesn't just kind of bounce off of our fingers and still hit us in the face. So touch is also very important for movement. So as babies are developing, their sense of touch is used for two purposes: withdrawal and approach. So we talked about all the reflexes, I think, already. And so if you think about your palmar grasp as an approach reflex, so it's wanting to be nearer to the stimulus. So if you put a finger in the hand, they grasp it, then they want to be close to that stimulus. They like that stimulus. Whereas the Bagibinsky, where you touch their feet and they withdraw their toes, that's more like a withdrawal reflex. When a baby is born, their sensory receptors are the most precise inside their mouth. So that's why you're always saying, if you give a baby anything, they're sticking it in their mouth immediately. So you want to keep small objects away from them so they don't choke. But it's not a bad thing for them to explore their world with their mouth, because that's the best way that they can do that. So as they get older, their sense of touch becomes more developed in their fingers and their hands, and they start to use that better, and that's where fine motor skills begin to develop better. And so that is your senses and how they're important for movement. And I hope that helped you to understand this chapter a little bit better.